Get ready for an unfiltered and uncensored listening experience.
Gender reveal.
They want me to do something that could make
Kasi sa
sense.
punto, ako
They
yung
hate
tipo
when
ng
I
tao na
keep
pag
dreaming I'll
dumating
be
ako sa puntong
famous.
sagot na
But I
sagot
don't
na
give a
talaga.
fuck, I'ma keep
Benta niya 90
chasing.
million. Where can you find that?
Don. God
Where can you
damn.
find that?
Hello, I'm back. And we are live. We have Jillie on the podcast. Again, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. So let's uh let the audience into the conversation. Who is Jillie?
Hello, I'm Maria. Thank you for having me, Nick. I appreciate the opportunity. I am a trauma and emotion coach. I am an Akashic Records practitioner. I am a medium and intuitive, among other gifts and talents and hats that I wear. So, in short, what I get to do is I get to hold space and be witness to women coming into their aha moments about their trauma and about emotional abuse and some of the other things in the world that we don't talk about regularly, but that if we and as we dig into them, we find that they affect every corner and every part of our lives. And so I get to be witness to that. And I came into my journey about 12 years ago. I was in a crossroads, and I was lucky enough to have somebody in my life who, which I think we all need, but I was lucky enough to have someone in my life at the time who said, "You're not okay. You need help. You need a therapist. Go find a therapist and come back. I'm your accountability partner." And so they held me to account to find a therapist and go. They didn't care what we talked about, et cetera, et cetera. They just wanted to make sure that I took action and found somebody and did the work. And so all these years and multiple different people helping me, supporting me, and me doing the work for myself and supporting myself, I am now into the iteration of trauma and emotion coach.
Oh wow, that's amazing. Um, let's go back a bit. So 12 years ago, what happened? Like, what of the what are the traumas that you've experienced?
Oh, I mean, the traumas that I've experienced are most of them happened way before that. But,
Oh
and
wow.
the thing is too, is I, want to talk about how we a lot of times associate trauma with one big event,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like rape or someone being shot or witnessing something or being mugged or something of, somebody dying or something where it has to be a big deal. And I want to highlight the notion that trauma can be what I call big T trauma, and it can be little t trauma. So it can be like, for example, if you're in a space where your parents were unavailable for you emotionally, like they were physically working 3 jobs, they were doing the best they can, but you needed that emotional support as a child and you never had it. Or being in the space of like growing up in an inner city neighborhood. Like if you're in the US, there's a lot of neighborhoods in the country where people have really, it's dangerous. It's dangerous to walk around. They have really hard lives because they're in situations that are socioeconomically not conducive to, a healthy lifestyle. And that too can be trauma. But to go back and talk about my specific trauma, my parents divorced when I was very young, and neither one of them were emotionally available. There was a lot of, I felt abandonment, and I know now that that's not the case, but that's how my small self processed it. And then going into my teenage years, there was a lot of bullying. There was sexual abuse. There was sexual assault in there. There was harassment in there. My late 20s, I was date raped. And that was one of those things where you never think it's going to happen to you. And then it does, and you don't have the resources, which is one of the things that I also talk about a lot, is resourcing for women. And then, just a lot of little things that happened in life that, again, you wouldn't register as, your brain wouldn't necessarily register as trauma, but your nervous system will.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened in 2011 was I was lucky enough in 2011 that, again, someone held me to account, but there was the notion, it was a trifecta of events that happened. And among them was this guy that I liked dumping me for somebody else. And then my brother getting married, which is probably a really weird thing for some people, but he's younger than me. And I had this idea in my brain that I was supposed to get married first. And it just, again, not his responsibility, completely mine, but just realizing all the things that it brought up about how I was supposed to do this and I was supposed to do that. And a lot of times our traumas can bring up, and these little things in life that happen to us can also bring up guilt, shame, regret, etc. And so my friend, again, said, go find a therapist. So I did. And the first thing the therapist said to me was, you really just need to be heard. And I feel like all these years later, that is such an important, even for my clients, right, is an important component is we don't feel heard. And the flip side of that is a lot of times we're so traumatized and we're so afraid to ask for things because we're afraid of people saying no, we're afraid of rejection, we're afraid of people abandoning us, that we don't talk about those things. We don't even make the ask, and then we build resentment and anger and all those other pieces into it. And so, with like, going back and talking about my rape, one of the more significant things that happened to me was, being date raped and not understanding what was going on and having the immediacy of my boyfriend at the time, who was my rapist. That trust was broken instantaneously. And I remember, I can put myself back in that space now, a whole lot less emotion because I've healed most of it. But I remember in my mind going, uh-oh, and having to make a split-second decision about what I was going to do. And to be honest with you, there wasn't a lot of options.
Mm-hmm.
Because once someone breaks trust with you, you have no way of knowing what their next move is. If you expected them to do this and they do that, and it's 180 degrees off of what the person that you thought you knew, the entire thing is busted and shattered. And as my rape crisis counselor was kind enough to tell me, and I have said many times since then to other survivors and other victims, listen, your job in the moment is to survive. Your job is to get out of the situation alive. Everything else after that, we can deal with, we can heal it. And for me personally, to be in the situation where I repressed it. I repressed my rape. It happened in October, of 2002. And I didn't start dealing with it until 2013.
Oh, wow.
And I remember, and that's a very common thing actually, right? But I had suppressed it and repressed it, and I decided in my brain that it wasn't rape, it wasn't this, it wasn't that. He couldn't have raped me because he's my boyfriend, and maybe I didn't. All these things, and I was having really nasty nightmares, and I was having all kinds of issues, and I thought about at one point saying, what if I went and dealt with this? And I didn't even, I found the Rape Crisis Center actually through a friend of mine, and had this notion, like, I need to talk about this. And I remember walking in the Rape Crisis Center, and I was all by myself. I had told nobody. And normally in the course of my life, just as I'm doing things or texting people or talking to people, I tend to share what I'm doing. And in this case, I had not. I had told no soul. Nobody on earth knew where I was. And I walked in and talked to a counselor and told my story. And I remember thinking during all of that, lightning is just going to come and strike me dead, because we're taught, and no one had told me not to talk about it, but a lot of times our brain tells us we have so much shame around things that we're like, I can't talk about this. I cannot. If I talk about this out loud, the world is going to explode. It's going to come to a screeching halt, so on and so forth. And one of the things that I want to share with your, listeners, if they're thinking similar things about their trauma, their piece, they're like, oh my God, I can't talk about it thing, whatever that may be. I want to encourage you into the space of, if you're old enough to have lived through September 11th, that the world did not stop turning on September 11th. And so if the world is not going to stop turning for something that is of that magnitude, the world will not stop turning for your crisis. The world will not stop and everybody suddenly look at you and be like, ah! That's not a thing. And a lot of times our brains think And that's not to say, please hear me when I say, I'm not saying that to say that your situation, that your trauma is not important. It is incredibly important, and dealing with it will change your life. My point, though, is that a lot of times we get into spaces where, and I know I was in that space for quite some time, where I didn't say anything because I had this notion in my brain that if I did, people, quote unquote, were going to know about it. And suddenly everybody was going to look at me differently, and I was going to be marked with shame and all these things that my brain was telling me. And so I got to be in a space of, you know what? People will know what you choose to tell them. So sometimes that's going to be like, yeah, I was date raped and this is it. And then you move on. And sometimes people go, whoa, wait, what? Like, I need to know what happened, because it's a big part of why you are the way you are today, like the things you advocate for and so on and so forth. And I also want to encourage people in the space of, let yourself distinguish who you trust enough to share your truth and your trauma with. Because a lot of times our brain wants to just like, we want to, part of the thing when I walked in the rape crisis center, when I needed that cancer, that was that shame out of my body. And I got to a point, which a lot of us do, where I was like, I will do anything to not have to deal with this anymore. And I'm at a point now in my life when things happen that I feel that like that space is down the road. I will say, okay, wait a minute. Wait just a second. What are you feeling? What's going on? What's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? Then do it. So much quicker than, like, I don't hold on to anything for usually like 11 days anymore, 11 minutes, never mind 11 years. I don't do it. And I feel like that's a pivot point for me. And I think that that's a really good lesson for a lot of people, is our minds are liars. Our egos are massive liars. And if we can allow ourselves to be in the space of, this happened to me and it's valid, my emotions that are attached are valid, and I get to be in the space that I'm in, and I get to feel what I feel, and it's all valid, and I get to heal it, because I deserve to have a whole life. I deserve to be complete. That's really important.
Wow. And I want to be like, I want to, and I'm glad that you're here right now, because with everything that you've been through, I really, sympathize with you, because there's a lot of women out there who have who have been raped, but have didn't have the courage to deal with it, because, like you mentioned, the shame and this running thought that it's their fault. I don't know why, actually. When I hear about these things, I keep asking myself why women always blaming themselves, because you're the victim. And
Mhm.
it's, instead of having this feeling of, maybe it's my fault, or maybe uh I've been the one who provoked this, but it's not, though. it's it's
Correct.
the person who did that to you. You didn't do nothing wrong. And I really hope that women who have been raped, who have been sexually assaulted, would come through and deal with this tremendous traumas. And I'm glad that you're doing this right now, and I applaud you for it. Um,
Thank you.
why, though, women, especially, you know, who have this tremendous experience, this extremist traumas, have this feeling of um blaming themselves?
My experience around it, and my experience of, walking other women through this, and just watching, it's in the United States, especially, how our media deals with rape and sexual assault, and how our justice system deals with rape and sexual assault. Um,
You know what? Um,
We had this.
can we talk about that justice system? Because I've read a lot of articles about that, and sometimes I'm not saying all, but men are more on susceptible about this because they can settle or they can twist the story to the point of view of the women that it's their fault, not mine. Let's talk about it.
So I think here's the thing. For me, and again, my experience and my own personal experience and my experience with walking a lot of women through the aftermath of rape and the aftermath of sexual assault is that our first and foremost, rape and sexual assault are tremendously underreported in this country. The numbers that you see year over year are probably, if I was guessing, and I've also been told this by police and other people that I've spoken with about it, I would say we're off by in the neighborhood of 30% easily. And
Wow.
people that don't report, because here's the thing, women, like you said, women are in the space of, the US justice system is such that it says you're innocent until proven guilty. But the reality of it is most women don't even report because they know it's going to be a she said thing. A lot of women, like I've talked to many, many, many women, and I've done numerous podcasts on it and said, listen, please, if you were raped, don't use it as a weapon. If you have sex with somebody who you just decide after the fact that you didn't want to have sex, or that, gosh, you just realized you were cheating on your boyfriend and things like that, because that does happen, especially in high profile situations. Don't decide that you were raped and then go get a rape kit. That being said, because it does happen more often than people know about, but if you're in a situation where rape or sexual assault has happened to you, get a rape kit. That doesn't have anything to do with whether you report it. It doesn't have anything to do with whether you're going to use it. It's IDing your rapist. Any of that stuff has nothing to do with it. A rape kit is simply getting every tiny little bit of, fragment of tissue, information, proof that something happened. Whether it's getting tissue from underneath your fingernails, whether it is getting, tissue from, your teeth, it's getting tissue from parts of your body. They have the rape kit, and going through having SANE nurses who are, it's SANE, nurses who are trained specifically to deal with sexual assault and rape. It's a very thorough step-by-step process. And a lot of women, a lot of people in general don't even know anything about it. And I want to just encourage your listeners to go look it up, just because you never know. And I've used it twice with somebody who's called me, messaged me, reached out to me and said, hey, didn't this happen to you? This just happened like an hour ago, whatever. And I'm like, don't wash your hands, don't wash anything. Go get a rape kit done. If you don't know who did it, etc., you don't have to do anything, but you have to have that information. I didn't report. I got in the shower. I scrubbed my skin till it was raw. I drove myself home, and then I took another shower. And in my case, it would have been he said, she said, and there was children involved and some other extraneous circumstances, etc. I never reported. But I want to say that one of the things that's really messed up about the justice system in the US is that most it's a state level thing, first and foremost. And most states do not have legislation written to speak to sexual assault and rape, because we have this notion, and part of it is definitely an old white guy thing, but part of it also is people in general. And I will also say people that call themselves Christians, generally speaking, can't imagine somebody raping somebody else. And if you can't imagine a crime, you can't write legislation, and therefore you can't write laws to punish that crime. So if we're in a space where we can't imagine, some states have really solid, and some, I mean, fewer than 15 last time I checked out of 50, have really solid, good, like, laws as far as like sexual assault, rape, all those things that are very solid as far as, you know, being very thorough with the legislation, with the language, and so on. And then also with the punishment. So we're not, because like for me, when someone gets, you know, when someone gets, first of all, if someone even goes to trial and they get convicted of sexual assault or rape, I'm always over the moon. I don't want it to happen, but because the conviction rate is less than 5%, real life, when it happens, I'm always like, yes, this is a victory. And people are always, every single time, like angry and this and that and distraught. And I'm like, I hear you, but understand, as someone who's been dealing with this for years and years and years, and is effectively an expert, not an expert on it, like an accidental expert on it, anytime there's a conviction, I'm happy. Anytime. I mean, even if someone, like, there was someone about 3 years ago, I think it was, in Texas, and the guy got 2 years. And they're like, he's, you know, he spent over a year in jail. So it's like, basically he's going to serve 1 year in jail. And I'm like, okay. And people were like, well, it's better than nothing. And people are like, and all, you know, like screaming at me on social media and outraged and all the things. And I said, wait a minute. And I started telling people, like, reading the laws in Texas on sexual assault and rape, which I did before I commented. People were like mind blown, because they were having a really hard time with the notion that, like, this guy getting what he got was good. And he should go away for 15 or 20 years, or, you know, go away for life. And I'm like, yes, as the, you know, as a rape survivor, this affects me for the rest of my life. However, that being said, it's really important to remember that in a lot of states, there are no laws that have anything when it comes to punishment. You're asking a judge can only look at the judicial system, the justice system can only look at what's already written. So if it's like someone is, you know, rape, and, you know, rape says, okay, 2 to 5 years. And people go, but wait a minute. I'm like, okay, well then, before you're getting angry, I valid to be angry with the rapist. And like you said earlier, talking about, you know, why women blame themselves, because our media, by and large, everything talks about, you know, what was she wearing? What was she doing? And, you know, what happened? And, you know, was she drinking? Was she doing this? Was she wearing a short skirt? Was she, and I end up saying to people, and I have through many, many cases that are public knowledge, and some local stuff that's not as, you know, public knowledge, but still, my saying to people, listen, stop just a second and realize that she could be walking around naked, and that doesn't give you the right to do anything. If you want to know what caused rapists, what will cause rape, rapists cause rape.
Exactly.
People making a choice to violate somebody else's freedom, somebody else's space, somebody else's boundary, somebody else's body, somebody else's energy. That's it. I mean, it's really, when you cut down to it, it's really simple. And people go, but I'm like, listen, I'm not the person who would wear a micro short dress. I wouldn't, I don't even put myself in situations where there's alcohol most of the time. However, that being said, for me personally, that's my own prerogative. I'm never going to look at a woman who's in a club who's wearing a micro short dress and having a good time and enjoying herself and whatever, and go, she shouldn't, because she might be raped. No. Because the reality of the situation is, when people ask the question, I've had people ask it, well, what do you think happened? I'm like, well, this is what I've read happened, right? And the reality of it is, you know, one of the nice things that colleges do now, and they had started doing it back when I was in college, long time ago, but they started making part of freshman orientation and incoming student orientation was you had to go to a mandatory conversation about rape and sexual assault and drinking and, you know, all the things that nobody wants to talk about. And the reality of it is that when I'm asked is, listen, if you're in a situation where there's alcohol involved, me personally, I would not even do anything romantic with somebody. Romantic, quote unquote. I wouldn't do anything sexual. I wouldn't even make out or kiss somebody who is inebriated. Because I don't want a guy to be in a space where he does something and she's consenting while she's drunk, and then she says after the fact that it was rape. Because that's not fair to him either. And the reality of the situation is that happens too, where people will be in a space where they're drinking or there's, substances involved, and things can happen. And again, it's important to realize that the judicial system, yes, it's broken when it comes to rape and sexual assault. 1000% it is. However, you can't execute punishment where there's none written for things that aren't written into the law. And a lot of people don't even realize, like, people ask me, like, what can I do? April is sexual assault month. And I always tell people, you know what you can do? Go and read your law for your state or your province or wherever you live in the world, and go see what it says about rape and sexual assault. Or, there was one, I'm trying to remember where it was. It was someplace in Southeast Asia. And a friend of mine was visiting, and she happened to get attacked. And she messaged me and said, I don't know how to read any of this. It's in a foreign language. I need your help. And I said, okay, I don't read any of the foreign languages over there, but I was more than happy to help you find whatever the thing is. So we were able to find the laws regarding quote unquote unwanted touch. And they were about as deep as a muddy rut. So you're talking about, like, it was basically saying unwanted touch is defined as touch that is not wanted. It was like, okay, help me. So she ended up having to go to the police station and say, hey, this happened to me, help me. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, in the United States, I'd be calling 911. I would be doing this and this and this. I'm in a foreign country. I don't know what I'm doing. And they were like, okay, so basically it was unwanted touch. And she was like, well, yes. On a very basic level, yes. And she said, but it happened. And they were like, so she finally had, found somebody who, spoke English and was able to translate for her and, walk through it with her. And they said, well, basically we don't really have rape laws because we don't really have rape in this country. And she was like, do I cheer for this? That, yay, there's a country that has no rape? Or do I go, oh yeah, you do, just nobody wants to deal with it. So there's no laws written about it. There's nothing written about it because nobody wants to talk about it because it can't possibly happen here. And she ended up being in a space where she curtailed her stay in that country and came back to the US. But she found herself in a box. Like, she was in a bad position because something happened and there was literally no laws. And that's one of the things that a lot of people find out here in the United States is that, when something happens to you that you're like, okay, there has to be a law, but this has to be illegal. And a lot of times you find out that there's really nothing. They're like, rape and sexual assault are not legal, or, again, like, unwanted touch is not okay. But as far as, like, what do we do to punish somebody who has touched you in an unwanted manner? A lot of times there's nothing. And that's something that for a lot of people is really mind-blowing, not even to mention, like, once you've dealt with the fact that it happened, how do you recover? Like, how do you get like, I was lucky that, all those years later, when I reported, when I went to the Rape Crisis Center, I was very lucky that I had, the emotional support and the counseling available. But it's for residents of the where I lived at the time. And I've since moved, and I've since discovered that locally to me, we are in a much poorer area. I'm in North Carolina, and we're in a much poorer area. And they're like, well, we have this, but we don't really have, like, there's no resources for it. There's no, like you could go to you could go to the hospital and they can do this for you. And I'm like, okay, but there's nothing here in case something were to happen. Correct. So you don't have any like sheriff's deputies. You don't have any local police that are trained specifically to help somebody. It doesn't have to be a squad. It can be like 1 or 2 people. I mean, thank God it doesn't happen a lot, but the reality of it is that, again, the justice system, to include the police, we just don't have a lot of training. We don't have a lot of, we don't put resources to it. And another thing that will blow your mind completely is if you have a rape kit done, and I don't know what the latest statistic is. I know what it was when I was campaigning for this back in 2013. And we had a young woman who had been raped, and she went and had a rape kit done, all the things, and her rapist was caught, and they got a confession out of him and had DNA match and all the things. And her advocate had to go to the state crime bureau and pull the kit and babysit them to have them analyze the kit. So she's like, where's the rape kit? And they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, we're not doing it. And she's like, we have a court hearing tomorrow morning. This guy has written a full confession. We know because the sane nurse told us, the police officer that was investigating it told us, full confession, everything. This is basically an open door, not even going to trial case. The guy's going to spend time in jail. Where's the rape kit? We need the rape kit. And they're like, it's in here somewhere. Most states and cities, and it's SBI's like State Bureau of Information, but city by city, most big cities, and I can't even tell you about small towns because they probably aren't even looked at, but are thousands of rape kits behind. Like, it's not even a priority unless someone comes in and says, hey, can you analyze this specific case? So you could literally, this was what the thing that I said back years ago was, so you could literally have a serial rapist, running around a college campus raping women, and there's no connection because we don't have any DNA links. We don't have anything in the system. We don't have anything to say, hey, we have this DNA match. We have this type match in the system, like we do with ballistics, to say, oh my God, or we have a DNA match with this person when they're fingerprinted, to say, hey, a fingerprint matches here and there. We have this person has a rap sheet a mile long. Or, hey, we have this person, we can connect these two. So all these rape kits are sitting on a shelf and no one's touching them and no one's analyzing them. Is that correct? And it was like, and they said, yes, that's correct. And when I went to my then Attorney General for the state of North Carolina, now our governor, and said, with a group of women, and said, we need to have these rape kits analyzed. This is important. Really needs to be an imperative for you all. Is it a money thing? Is it a people thing? What is the thing that's keeping all these rape kits on shelves? And he said to my face and to the face of the other women that I was with, well, rape kits just aren't a priority.
Why?
And I said, okay, so as a rape survivor, I said, why? I need to understand why. Again, is it a money thing? Do we need to go out and raise funds? Do I need to raise awareness? What is the deal with, or is it something where nobody's asking for them? Rapes don't go to trial all that often, and you don't really care that, your granddaughter could be on the campus of this university and there could be a serial rapist that nobody knows about. And it was like, they're just not a priority. So I was asking the person that brought us to the meeting, and I said, so let me let me understand this. Because a lot of the other women that were with us were newer victims than myself, and they were in a space where they were like just too stunned to even say anything. Like this was just cool. Especially the people that were like, my government loves me and my government protects me. Anybody that's in that space, like this is the kind of stuff that will make you go, oh wait, no. So I was the one that articulated with the help of my advocate, and said, so I understand correctly, and I want to understand correctly. It's not for, it's basically a lack of resources, but it's also a lack of priority. So for whatever reason, we have thousands of rape kits sitting on the shelves in various big cities, never mind the conversation about smaller towns and, or, counties, but you can't tell me why. You can't say, hey, we don't have enough people. We don't have enough people in this, state crime bureau, in the crime lab at this or that, whether it's the city of Raleigh or it was like Wake County or Mecklenburg, Charlotte, or wherever it might be. It doesn't really matter where it is, because it's a problem. When people start digging into it, they find that is a nationwide issue that we just don't put priority on it. And then when you're in a space of, like you said earlier, why don't women report? Why is this so? Why do women believe that it's their fault? Because as we tell them, because we don't want to. Because what happens if we force men to take personal responsibility? And I say to people all the time, listen, I know it's really hard to come in the space where the good guy did a bad thing. I hear you, but understand statistically that rapists are not homeless men living under bridges. They are fathers, they are sons, they are grandfathers, they are boyfriends, they are husbands, they are good men. They are people that are walking down the street next to you at lunch hour in a suit. They are somebody's baby brother. They are somebody's boyfriend. They are some single guy. They're somebody's son. They're somebody's grandson. Statistically speaking, that's just a fact. And it's frightening how many people they could never. And the reality is, I'm like, I don't want that to be true. But I know statistically, my rapist was a dad. He was his son, his grandson. And he was his coworkers, like glowing things to say about him. He's a good guy. And it's even worse when you bring in the religious component, because so many religions are like, but they're a good, whatever faith you're in, man. So how could they? I see him every Sunday with his, doting wife or his children, or I see him standing at the pulpit, or I see him standing at the door greeting people. I see him praying. He's a good man. He would never do this. And I go, okay, I hear you. And statistically speaking, I don't make up the statistics. They're reported to the FBI. They're online. They're free for anyone to see. Statistically speaking, he's not the man you think he is. Statistically speaking, good guys rape women. And I want to share with you, and I'm not saying and please understand, please hear me when I say, I know a lot of, all men don't suck. There's a lot of fantastic men in the world. There's a lot of amazing men in the world who are fantastic dads, fathers, grandfathers, men, husbands, all the things, all of it. And that fact can coexist with, there are men that are rapists and sexual assault perpetrators that are hiding in plain sight. And that's a really scary thing. For me, it's one of those things where, when I see a public case, and there's a woman, and this is a really weird tie-in, but just to illustrate the point, is there was a woman that was allowed to be a kicker for a football team, college football team, probably like 2 years ago now, 2 or 3 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. But point of fact was she did some other sport and they needed a kicker and she suited up and was a football kicker. And all these men were online commenting about how they wanted to rape her. They wanted to sexual assault. They hoped that she was raped. They hoped that this happened. They hoped that bad things happened to her. They were going to find her address and go hurt her and da 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 da. And so much so that the story got taken down.
Oh,
The story got
wow.
taken off completely social media because there were so many comments. And I saw someone screenshot it to me and said, you need to go look at this and see the comments. And I'm a hand of God, spent easily 4 hours responding. If that was your sister, would you be okay with that? If that was your daughter, would you be okay with that? If that was your mother, your grandmother, your neighbor next door that you think is the best thing since sliced white bread, your best female friend, your coworker, your wife, would you be commenting like that? What is your major malfunction? What is wrong with you that you can't just say, congratulations to you for being a kicker? That's a really cool thing. You can't just scroll past it like a grown adult. And people it was like, oh my God. And I'm like, listen, and I had some people come back at me and I'm like, I'm a rape survivor. It's not funny. It's not a joke. It's disgusting and it's despicable. And they were like, oh my God. And I'm like, listen. And I was telling people, I had several people tag me and I'm like, oh, I've already been tagged. Go look at my tag that you go scroll up. Hundreds of people that I responded to. If this was your mother, would you think it was okay? If this was your daughter, if this is your sister, if this is your baby sister, this is your best bro friend, his sister. The chick that you've been welcoming into your house because she's your best friend, your best bro friend, your girlfriend's little sister, your girlfriend. Someone says that about her. Are you okay with it? And it's like, I'm like, that is where we have the opportunity to change the conversation. And people were like, oh my God. And then people were coming after me, which again, I'm at a point where I'm like, go ahead. And people were like, whoa. And I'm like, listen. And I even wrote a big post about it on Facebook and said, if this is okay with you, unfriend me. Because in real life, this is crap. This is the stuff that's why rapes happen. Because you're sitting here saying, I would do this to her. I would do that for her and thinking it's cute. So because you're mad at somebody for making the decision to allow her to kick on a football team, which has literally nothing to do with your life, does not affect you one iota. If someone hadn't posted about it on ESPN, you would have never known about it. You're sitting here writing awful things about somebody. Like it's completely okay. And I'm like, and if you're in a space where you have this conversation in a bar with a buddy, all of you need re-education. All of you need to sit with somebody and have a discussion with all the women in your family and say, hey, have any of you been sexually assaulted and I don't know about it? Has anybody suffered a rape? Has anybody ever been grabbed inappropriately? Now, having someone cop a feel and being raped are two completely different conversations. But the point of fact is, all of these things happen far more often than we know. And so many people, you asked earlier why this happens, why women think this, because our men are not taught boundaries. So many of our men, because their dads and grandfathers never taught them boundaries, because it wasn't a thing back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and prior, especially in the United States. It was like women were still viewed as property a lot of times. I can do whatever I want. So we come back into 2020s, 2000s, and these things are still happening, and we're like, I don't understand, like, because no one has ever said, or no one has ever pushed back when a man's like, I'm gonna bend her over and blah 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 blah, and his buddies have done him no favors and have been like, dude. Or the conquest conversations are plotted behind closed doors. Oh, that's just locker room talk. Until it's not. And I feel like these are important conversations, and I'm glad you brought it up, because that's the reality is that when we joke about these things, and again, you're going to pick and choose your battles, you truly are. But a lot of times I will, be in situations where I'll say to people, if I was in a space where I'm brand new to something, and I've done this, if I'm brand new to people, I don't drink anyway, but I will, if you want to drink, no, thank you, I'm good. And a lot of times I've given a lot of permission for people to stay sober because I'm choosing sobriety. And I'm like, because you know what? I never want to have a man be in a space where he's falsely accused of something. And I never want to be in a space where I don't have control over, in a social situation, over my body and my choices. And I never want someone to be in that space where something goes sideways, and I don't want to be a party to that. And I get to be in a space where I get to, sometimes I'm educating, and sometimes it's, is it ever uncomfortable? I don't want to do that because it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation. Yeah, well, the one after it where he says, I didn't do it, and now he's in handcuffs, that's even more uncomfortable. Promise you that. I would much rather have someone say, hey, man, let's not joke about things like that. If this was your sister, would you be okay with that conversation? If this was your mom, would you be okay with that conversation? You probably wouldn't. I mean, there's a time and a place for, the American Pie, if you're familiar with that movie, the American Pie jokes, but there's also, real life, where more often than not, it's like, it's not funny. And, watching women, and being in that situation myself, but watching women in social situations or in situations where everything about their life got violated and turned upside down through no fault of their own. Watching that recovery is something that I want to say I never want to see it again. And yet I'm on many lists with many friends. I'm like, if you have someone that happens to, reach out to me, and I will advocate for them. I will hold the space for them. I will do whatever I can to support them in their healing journey. So the chances are statistically that it will happen again in my life. But the reality of it is that, we got to be unafraid to have the conversations, especially as men. We got to be men get to be in a space where it's like, dude, that's not okay. Like, if that was your mom, would that be funny? It wouldn't be funny. So I tell people, if whatever the person is for you, your mom, your sister, your girlfriend, your wife, whatever, whoever it is that you're dead, that's a line, you don't cross that. Every woman is now that person. Because that's when you get to the space of, oh, yeah, I wouldn't want that said about my person. That's when you shift the conversation. That's when you go, yeah, I see what she was saying about how you don't get to talk about my wife, sister, mom, grandma, whatever that way. We don't have that conversation. Nope. Then everybody's that person. Then you shift the space to, this is uncomfortable, bro, but like, no, it's not funny. You wouldn't do that in real life. And those are the things that ultimately, and again, along with, when people want to know, talk about our justice system, I encourage you, no matter where you are in the world, to go look up your laws, see if there even are any laws, because you might be really shocked. And then talking to your, local legislators, or, whoever, is figuring out, who has influence over this, who can speak to on this, and speak to them and saying, hey, I noted, I was reading up on this, and I'm wondering why this is the law. Like, why is the punishment for this 2 to 5 years when a woman lives with this forever? Why is there no punishment? There are some places where there's no punishment. There's no law written, literally, because we can't imagine, unless we can imagine ourselves into the space of heinousness, we can't do anything to combat it.
And you hit the ball in the park. And it's really interesting because some men really don't have this awareness. Because
Correct.
I have a sister that is 1,000 miles away from me. But at the same time, I wanna I wanna have her own journey, her own uh mission in life. And
Yep.
you also mentioned earlier, people, especially in the media, especially here in the Philippines, the first thing that they're gonna ask, what are you wearing? What are you drinking? Like, dude, what the fuck? It doesn't even matter.
Mm-hmm.
Rape is rape. Rapists
Mm-hmm.
did that. Not because women wear short skirt or women wearing shirt crop top. Like you mentioned, any women can walk naked and there's nothing gonna happen if there's no rapist. If men can set their boundaries. And that's
Yep.
just the sad reality. And oh, I can't I can't even put into words because some men are really unaware or don't have the ability to be aware of these things because we or one of my uh close friends, we don't joke about this because this isn't a joke. Raping someone
Mm-hmm.
isn't a joke. Yes, we can
Correct.
talk about women, like how hot she is, like how I like her, or how she's beautiful, or I want to be her boyfriend. Like we can talk about that, but we don't talk about raping someone because that's just plainly stupid and idiotic to be a fact.
Well, the thing too is that there's a lot of countries in the world, there's a lot of cultures that, and a lot of religions that protect their men. That,
That's a good
people
point.
don't see that. But the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of religions, there's a lot of, cultural things that are, oh, that's cultural, blah, blah, blah. I'm okay, but it's not okay
Mm-hmm.
to be in a space where it's like, well, um, I mean, someone that I knew, I wouldn't call her a friend, I'd probably call her an acquaintance. But anyway, she moved to the US from another country and she was here for 5 or 6 years, maybe. And she's walking home late at night after work and she was assaulted. And I found out about it probably 2 or 3 weeks later, through a random conversation. And the person said, well, and I said, well, what, does she know what happened? Does she, what, like, details? And they shared all the details with me and they said, well, nothing is going to happen. And I said, okay. And they're like, well, she knows who did it. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing to, I'm not in the state. I'm not in the state where she lives. I don't know her from Adam. And I'm okay. Well, this is what I would do. And it's like, well, the problem is that he's this, this, and this. And so he's being protected. And so this whole thing, and it was about, it's a cultural difference and he's calling it a this and they're massaging it like this. And they went to court. They brought him in and brought charges against him. And she came in and she was like, I'll give a victim statement, all the things. And she did the rape kit. She did everything the right way, which is frustrating as all get out when you do all the things and still. And they said, well, his attorney is saying that he's got a public defender. And they're saying that he doesn't understand enough English to understand that it's a cultural, he's saying that this is just something that they do in his country and blah, 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 blah.
That's just
And
stupid.
so, and I was like, well, and I went back and knowing the details of what happened, I said, okay, so if I go to that country, there's going to be people just doing that like randomly, like that's what you want me to believe. And it was like, well, the long story short was that they tried to say there was a cultural bias and there was a language barrier. And I'm like, okay, but wait a minute. She is walking down the street, fully clothed, mind you, and she's doing everything right. She doesn't have earbuds in her ear. She does not, listen to music. She's not distracted. She's doing everything the way she's supposed to be doing it. She's got a flashlight with her, all the things. She's paying attention. And then it happens. And they're like, yeah. So the reality, this is what happened. And I'm like, so because we're claiming it as a cultural issue, it's like, well, the judge said that they understood why, something like they understood why he was confused. And so they offered to, it was originally going to be 3 to 5 years in jail. And they were going to do this, they were going to do a plea deal. And they said, well, what they're wanting to do is they're wanting to plea it down to just the one charge, because there was originally 4 or 5, and all of them legitimate. And they want to plea it down to 2 years probation, no time in jail. And like, my mind was blown, like, whoa, the dude admitted it. She did the rape kit. She did all the things. She did everything she was supposed to do. And I said, so her life gets turned upside down. She has to move. She's having to do all these different things. And like, I was like, I'm mystified. I don't understand. And they were saying, well, because it's a cultural thing. And he's saying, and I'm like, I hear what he's saying, but here's the thing. In the United States, we don't just treat women like they're chattel. We don't just have permission to walk up to anybody we want and say hello and cat call them, and they don't respond. And so we grab them when we do bad things to them. That's not how it works. And it was like, yeah, I understand that. So he ended up getting, I want to say he ended up getting 1 year in jail, and it was a suspended sentence. And he got probation. So basically he served I think they said he served 3 months in jail, and he was out.
Damn.
And
Damn.
yeah. And it was like the friend reaching out to me, and this was basically after it was all over with and said and done, she's messaging me and what, for resources. And I said, she needs a rape crisis center. She needs a therapist. She needs somebody that is preferably specialized in this and can walk her through this and help her heal and teach her self-defense. I mean, and again, I'm not at all saying coulda, woulda, shoulda, anything. And none of this onus is on her. Okay. But I'm like, in the future, as a rape survivor myself, I have learned every kind of technique you can imagine, head on a swivel, the whole bit, to take care of myself, because that's the reality that we live in. So it's like knowing how to kickbox, knowing how to defense moves, knowing how to carry my keys, knowing how to never have my not have headphones on when I'm running around in public, et cetera, things you just don't do. And it's just really important that we have conversations like this that you and I are having, and just saying this is reality. I don't want it. If I had my druthers, it would be no rape, but I don't control people. So the best thing we can do is be aware of what to do if somebody, and here's the thing, God help me, I hope that you never use it. I hope that any woman listening to this is never in that space. That being said, having that information, so if someone says, hey, this happened to me, you don't destroy evidence. So that you have it, and then you can make a decision after the fact. Hey, you did this rape kit, you did cross your T's, dot your I's, we got all this evidence, we found your rapist. Then you can step into the question of, do I want to move forward? Do I want to press charges? Do I want to do anything? What is my next step? But if you don't have, if you don't have the resources, if you don't have the evidence, it's really hard to get anything out of it, to get anything done. And so, I'm in the space where, like, if I had known what a rape kit was, if I had known all those things back when my rape happened, I still can't tell you for sure what I would have done. I can't tell you if I would have reported, because the hardest thing about rape is it's he said, she said. And
That's
so
true.
if you're in a space where even like, famous cases, right, where it's like when they had, when that's the other thing that a rape kit can help you with, is if you're in a space where it's like the guy's like, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. And they go, well, we have evidence that we got, these skin scrapings from this part of her body. We got this evidence, we got this photo, etc. So yeah, this happened, and this is consistent with this. How many rape cases have you done? Well, probably 10,000 at this point. To have someone be able to say this is the situation helps you a great deal. And again, I would rather have the information and not need it than need it and not know and not take care of myself.
Exactly. And I'd like to point out that, and you mentioned this earlier, and you hit it in spark. Rapists are just hiding plain sight here in the Philippines, and I think all over the world. Priests are sometimes the rapists. They they're raping little women. They're raping little boys. I know some men here in the podcast will say, "Oh, men got raped too." Yeah, by other men, not women. Men got
Mm-hmm.
raped by other men,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the thing. And here's the point that I also want to point out is, I think there's no accountability or real consequence for rapists. Yeah, they can spend
Yes.
jail a year or two. Yeah, they can get probation. But for what? If they don't experience the real consequence, the real mental traumas, they can't really stop it. And I think that's the real reason why they're still rapists, because they know they're gonna get themselves out. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
who rapists who are exposed in public, they don't really care about their public opinion. And that's just the sad reality of it.
Sure.
You can cancel this man. You can cancel these people. But just dumb, because they don't care about being canceled. They need to have a real consequence of their actions. And that's by, you know, suing them. Having them experience the real consequence. Like, for example, if you're gonna kill someone, that person will spend the rest of his life in jail. Some of them spend solitude, and they're scared of that. And why not do that to the rapist? You know what I
And
mean?
again, yes, because I know exactly what you mean. And again, because we don't have the laws written to say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
if you commit murder and you plan it, that's murder one in most states in the United States. And therefore, if you do that, the consequence of that is life in jail or the death penalty or whatever it may be per the state. But so many people can't imagine that this person or that person could possibly be a rapist or could hurt somebody, that we don't have laws necessarily to deal with it. So we can't say, hey, this person is eligible to spend this much. Like, every time that I've read a high profile rape case or sexual assault case, and it's like the articles the last couple of years have started including, like, the state law says that the maximum this person would get if they were found guilty of all charges would be X amount of time. And usually it's maybe 5 years. And that's with other charges added on. So it's like, just the rape or sexual assault doesn't carry much of anything. And part of the thing too is, to your point earlier, so many men, our media deeply and heavily discourages women from reporting, number one. And number two,
That's just sad.
basically teach our men, we teach our men that they're going to get away with it.
Yeah.
Like if you just, plead the case that you're, this and this and this, and they always will have, you never see men who are rapists come to court disheveled and like looking like they just, whatever. They always show up in like suit and tie with the nice lawyer and the, like he's an upstanding, the argument is always, he's an upstanding member of the community and he has obligations and he has a job and he has a law firm and he has a this, he has a that. He has a business, he's got clients, he's got family, he's got kids, he's been a member, he's been a member of this community for his whole life, and his, family's been a member of this community for 70 years and blah, blah, blah. So he would never, right? Like, because this person and this and this and this, they would never. And it's like, and 9 times out of 10, again, part of it is also educating our judges, because so often our judges are like, okay, yeah, I mean, it was a case in a college kid case in Texas a couple years ago. And the judge said something to the effect of, well, I don't want to ruin, he's a fine, upstanding young man. I don't want one small mistake to ruin a vibrant career. The kid was a swimmer, like a high level swimmer. And it was like, okay, but what about the woman's life? What about the fact that she can't leave her house because she's terrified? What about the fact her life like stops in its place, and she now has her timeline of life is before rape and after rape. Like everything about her, how she lives her life changes dramatically. And you're sitting here saying, well, yeah, but because of one small mistake. And it's like, our judges also aren't educated to understand, like, what if we had judges come in and, go through a class and have them, have 15 women who've been raped. And again, our legislators can't even, in most states, are like, yeah, but most men are really good men. Okay, but you have laws that you've written for the ones who are not. We have a whole list of laws for murder and manslaughter and all of that to cover, to cover all those, cases where someone oops and murdered somebody. So why don't we have laws set up, and why isn't our judicial system, and again, these are open-ended questions, but it's like we don't talk through it and say, hey, what if we had said, hey, this is how my life has been impacted, this is the situation, and this is what I live with. Like me going back and saying, I was terrified to leave my house at night for years. I relearned how to trust myself. I was terrified of being in a relationship period for several years because I was like in the space of like, is it going to happen again? I trusted myself with this person and they broke that trust, right? Or I trusted myself to walk down a very well-lit popular street at X time of night, as was this case in this woman's case that I was talking about earlier. And like, she figured like, I'm in a well-lit space, there's businesses open, there's people out, whatever, there's a minimum doormen and bouncers, it's a Saturday night, blah, 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 blah. And still, so we end up in this space, right, of like, and I always like to, whenever I'm on a podcast, I like to bring, what can you do? Because I think that's really, I think having actionable steps for a lot of people. If you are a rape survivor, thriver, if you are a victim of rape, check your state guidelines as far as the statute of limitations. And I want to encourage you to report, even if you're in the space of like, hey, I just needed to say to somebody, to a police officer or whatever, hey, I just need to tell someone that I was raped. I need to report a crime. Even if it's years ago, whatever, and you are like, I'm in the space of, I had a friend that did it 15 years, I think, after her rape. And she walked into a police station and she said, hey, I need to talk to somebody to report a violent crime that I'm a victim of. And they were like, she's like, She stopped when she's like 15 years ago. I know I'm out of the statute of limitations. I just need to tell somebody. I need to say it out loud. And they were like, okay. And took care of it. Every state is going to be different. All the jurisdictions are all going to be different, and countries as well. But I also want to encourage you into the space of no shame in your game. If you're in a space where you've never talked about it before, say it in your shower, say it in your car, say it into your mirror, say it out loud. There's immense power in saying it out loud and letting go of that shame and realizing that the whole world does not come to a complete stop. Nothing crumbles. Your whole building does not collapse because you say something out loud. I also want to encourage you into the space that if you're like, how can I help? Being an ally looks like like we talked about earlier, having those hard conversations with people. If people are making jokes, if people are saying things that are inappropriate, man, what you just said is not appropriate. If it was your sister, would you say that? If someone said that about your sister, you'd be like, wow, you'd be ready to fight. Yeah, I would be, man. Okay, well then, same, flip it, right? But also, when it comes to our judicial system, I want to encourage you, wherever you are in the world, to go look at your state, province, local, whatever you got, laws, and see what they say. Is there anything about rape? Is there anything about sexual assault? Is there anything about unwanted touch? What does it say? And then talking to your officials, and it may be a wild goose chase. And here's the thing, you can always email me. They can email me at Jillie Maria at jilliemaria.com and say, hey, I heard you on this podcast and I'm trying to figure this out. And I could use, like, this is where I am and I don't even know the next step. Like, can you help me out? I'm pretty good researcher and I'm pretty good at being like, this is who I call, this is what I would do, whatever. But, because I personally like to have action steps, like, what can I do? How can I move this conversation forward?
And that's great. And I hope that a lot of people who are listening right now go get some help, do something, read your laws. And I like to point out, and I hope this isn't too, political, but in the States right now, there's this locomotion about abortion, right? And in my mind, I don't know why this this Supreme Court care about abortion instead of the action before abortion, that is rape. Because sometimes unwanted pregnancy results to rape. That's the result. So
Yes.
why the government, or why people in power limiting the women's right to do something in their body, because it's their body. It's not theirs. It's not it's not the state. United States doesn't own someone's body, but the state can give them the ability to do something. The state should have the ability to create options for women. Because what happened right now, too care they're too focused on abortion but not on the action itself. And that's just pathetic in my mind. I'm sorry to say that, because you're too focused on the abortion. You're not, like, the reason why rape still exists, because like we've mentioned earlier, there's no real consequence. If we can write a legislation, we can write a law to help women have an option to sue someone. Just create one. I know it's
Well,
simpler than it's said. It's simpler. It's easier to talk than to do. But that's really one of the options to give the women the power and the ability to say, all right, I've been the victim of this. I want that person to have severe consequence. And this is just my opinion.
well, the thing too is, I think understanding like how things get to the Supreme Court in the first, like that's its own separate podcast, really.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality of it is that, again, a lot of people, speaking into your point, a lot of people don't even know what their like, it doesn't affect them, or so they think. So they don't even know what their state laws or their, what the law says in the first place in order to say, okay, this is the situation. Because most states, and I mean, since the Dobbs decision here in the United States, there's a lot of states are helter skelter on what they're doing and how their laws are and whatnot. But most states have an exception for rape, incest, and when the life of the mother's in danger. But again, it's usually it is a space to, because then again, if you are raped and you have a rape kit done, they also do a pregnancy test as part of that. And they will give you Plan B, the morning after pill. They will during
That's good.
that process. So, but again, it's something where there's not a lot of laws. We're not challenging something to the space of, again, if there's no laws on the books in the state to talk about it, it can't get to the Supreme Court. The point I'm trying to make is to be in the space of a woman would have to be suing, and it would have to be turned down or denied her for her to say, okay, I'm going to sue up the ladder, so to speak, because this is not okay. And when those laws don't even in a lot of cases exist in the first place, it's like she's got to fight her own battle.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in the same space is like, like you said earlier at the beginning of the podcast, is, a lot of women don't report because we go in that space and people immediately the public goes in that space immediately of, well, what was she wearing? What was she doing? As opposed to saying, wow, this woman was raped. I'm going to stand with her. I don't care if she was wearing a potato sack or if she was wearing a bikini. Neither one of those gives someone the right to do anything to her. No, none of that. And so, it brings us into a space of, again, I'm one of those people that's gotten to the space of do what you can with what you have, start where you are. That's why, I'm encouraging people in the space of, go look up your state or local or province or wherever you live in the world. Go look up and see what the rules are, what the laws are, even say what the consequences are. And just because it probably will blow your mind, first of all. It probably will make you angry because it's probably going to be a slap on the wrist. However, that's a good place to start to say, hey, if I'm going to write my, like in, where I am in North Carolina, if I'm going to write my state legislator, for example, and say, hey, I went to look up the rules and it says this, and what can I do to help write laws that are stronger? What can I do to advocate, to use my voice as a survivor? What can I do to shift this conversation? What can I do as someone who's just a ally of, I'm a man who's an ally of women, and I want to be in the space of like, what can I do? Because I realize looking at the laws in this, wherever they live, that there's really no consequences. Like the guy's going to spend a year or two in jail, and that's if he's convicted, and yada, yada, yada. Like, that's insane. What can I do? Well, we'd have to do, okay, tell me the process and then step into the process. So that's where I would go with that conversation.
And also, I'd like to point out, like you mentioned earlier, the judge said, I don't wanna uh put this guy's career in jeopardy because of one small mistake. But in fact, it's not a small mistake. It's a life-changing mistake. That's a
Correct.
life-changing mistake for the victim, for that woman.
Correct.
And I really hope that our representative do something about it, because if you're gonna think about it, if this man happened to their daughters, my God, they will do something about it, and that's just sad. And that's applied to everything that we do. That we don't do something because it doesn't affect us. It doesn't affect us
Mhm.
internally. It doesn't affect us mentally and physically. And
Yes.
that should not be the main reason why we do something. That's not the main reason why you're in power and you're being represented by thousands of people.
Yes.
Do
I
it
agree.
because it you're the- you're the people who voted for you felt this, and the reason why they voted for you because you need to do something, not just because your daughter got raped or something. And I'm not wishing that to our representative, but that's just the sad reality of it. And I'm very glad that um you survived, and I'm glad that you're doing something about it, because it's really, it's difficult to be a woman in this day of age. It's
100%.
really difficult. And I know, for the persons who are listening to the podcast right now, we've been talking about, you know rape rape victims for an hour and almost 30 minutes. But having this important conversation, it's supposed to be long. It's supposed to be like 10 hours of conversation, 15 hours of conversation, not just by 30 minutes. Not like on the big media, they only have 15 to 30 minutes to talk about rape. It's not about that. It's about having a conversation. I know it's ugly. I know it's difficult for you to hear, but a lot of victims are experiencing more severe than that. And I've mentioned
Hmm.
earlier, and I'm gonna say it again. Yes, men do. Uh, Men really sometimes is the victim of rape, but men rape men, not women rape men. I know
Yeah.
some,
No.
you know, men are victims sometimes of physical abuse by some women, but if we're
Yes.
gonna talk about rape, if we're gonna talk about something this severe, men do rape others men. That's just the
Yes.
reality.
And I think that, yeah. And I think that, the thing is it's, it's important to have these conversations because we're still, in 2023, we're still in the space of like, that we're not talking about it, or we're talking about it and we're in a space of, like we said earlier, oh, excusing it, condoning it, they didn't mean to, it was just a mistake, da da da. And it's like, okay, but when you have a car accident, when if somebody accidentally shoots you, you're not, you're just a, victim of a stray bullet or whatever. You're still dead. The person is still
Mm-hmm.
dead. You know, we don't go, oh well, they didn't mean to. They have to face the consequence of having done that. So it's, it's always been an interesting thing to me that, we have all these things that we say about, you know, murder and, manslaughter and such and so forth. But then when it comes to like rape and sexual assault, we're in this space of like excusing it and downplaying it. And well, I don't want someone's life to be ruined for this. And I'm like, okay, but if he shot and killed me, would you then be wanting to do something about it? Or is it just because? Oh, I had actually had someone say that to me years ago. Well, it was only rape and you can heal from that, dear.
Fuck
And it was a
you.
woman that said it. And I was like, um, do you know anybody? Because I can talk for a couple hours to you about how my life has changed dramatically and significantly because of this. If you want to have that conversation, because I will honestly, when you're done, you will be cowering under a table when I'm done. And it's like, and that's me being nice about it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
so in the space of like, well, I don't want to see this happen. I'm like, okay, but the reality is he made a conscious choice to do a thing that was not okay. That violated me and my boundaries and my everything and flipped my life upside down. And you're sitting here telling me that, well, I don't care if the person meant to or not. When you have an accident with somebody and they, when you have an accident and it takes someone's life or puts someone in, severe jeopardy and, they have to rebuild their life, right? After a really bad accident, generally speaking, you're not going, well, they didn't, well, that's why an accident, because they didn't mean to. I'm like, okay, but it still changed that person's life. that person's, victims of any crime. But again, we get into the space of rape and sexual assault, and I've always found it so fascinating how with any other crime you talk about, people will be like, oh, and there's an open discussion about it, right? But when it comes to like rape and sexual assault, we're all like, and I'm like, listen, that has to stop. Thank you for, letting me be a guest and, sharing your thoughts and such. It's been an honor to do it, and it's very necessary.
Yeah. I mean, thank you so much for coming to the podcast and share that stories, because not a lot of people really have the courage to do it. And not a lot of people really, have that, still dealing with the traumas and can't really share it because it's still fresh for them. And I'm really
Yes.
thankful that you share your stories. Where they can find you.
They can find me online, JillieMaria.com, JILLIEMARIA.com. There's lots of ways. There's a contact page on there. There's also a couple of ways to contact me on there, as well as what I do in my services and whatnot. So be delighted to connect with people.
And I hope a lot of people will connect to you. And for those people who are struggling with anything from mental health, with dealing with traumas, dealing with sexual traumas, please do reach out to Jill, and I'm sure that she will help you to have this
Absolutely.
recovery journey. So with that being
Absolutely.
said, again, Jill, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So with that being said, peace out, people.
They tell me that I'm never gonna make it. They want me to do something that could make sense. They hate when I keep dreaming I'll be famous, but I don't give a fuck, I'ma keep chasing. I got all this potential that's deep inside of me, but they hate when you're successful cause they try to be. They sit there being judgmental because you're trying things, and they just want you to settle and do the right thing. So get a good job, don't slack off. Wake up every morning, make a good impression on your boss. Don't do anything that I wouldn't do, and when you're making money, make sure you don't spend it too soon. Fuck that, I'll do what I wanna do. I got a different path from everyone, and that includes you. Who are you to tell me how to live life? In these times it feels like nobody's right, yeah. So I'ma figure out what else we succeed, and then invest all of my time into that and proceed. I need whatever the hell could make me happy, and I don't think you have a clue what could that be. They tell me that I'm never gonna make it. They want me to do something that can make sense. They hate when I keep dreaming I'll be famous, but I don't give a fuck, I'ma keep chasing. They tell me that I'm never gonna make it. They want me to do something that can make sense. They hate when I keep dreaming I'll be famous, but I don't give a fuck, I'ma keep chasing. I think this life could be special if I get rid of the devils. They think that I am a rebel, I think they want me to settle. There's nobody on my level. They think that work is too stressful, I think that work is essential. The grind is all in your mental, and I don't think you understand what I'll go through just to be in control of my life soon. All the negativity, man, I'm immune. I don't really need a mask with all I've been through. I've been making changes for the ages. 5-10 year plans are contagious. I attack that shit, I'm tenacious. And if you ain't, get the fuck out of my way then. Got one life, I won't regret it. I will fight until I get it. I'll look back one day from heaven and say, damn, I learned some lessons. And say, damn, I have no questions. I had fun in every second, and the journey was a blessing, yeah. They tell me that I'm never gonna make it.